The wine sellers and sausage makers were doing a brisk trade, and whores walked brazenly amongst the stalls and pavilions. Some were pretty enough, one red haired girl in particular. He could not help staring at her breasts, the way they moved under her loose shift as she sauntered past. He thought of the silver in his pouch. I could have her if I liked. She'd like the clink of my coins well enough. I could take her back to my camp. I can have her all night if I wanted. He had never lain with a woman, and for all he knew, he might die in his first tilt. Tourneys could be dangerous. Well, whores could be dangerous too. The old man had warned him of that. She might rob me while I slept. And what would I do then? When the red haired girl glanced back over her shoulder at him, Dunk shook his head and walked away. He found Egg at the puppet show, sitting cross legged on the ground with the hood of his cloak pulled all the way forward to hide his baldness. The boy had been afraid to enter the castle, which Dunk put down to equal parts shyness and shame. He does not think himself worthy to mingle with lords and ladies, let alone great princes. It had been the same with him when he was little. The world beyond Flea Bottom had seemed as frightening as it was exciting. Egg needs time, that's all. For the present, it seemed kinder to give the lad a few coppers and let him enjoy himself amongst the stalls than to drag him along unwilling to the castle. This morning, the puppeteers were doing the tale of Florian and Jonquil. The fat Dornish woman was working Florian in his armor made of motley, while the tall girl held Jonquil's strings. You are no knight, she was saying as the puppet's mouth moved up and down. I know you. You are Florian the fool. I am, my lady, the other puppet answered, kneeling. As great a fool as ever lived, and as great a knight as well. A fool and a knight? Said Jonquil. I have never heard of such a thing. Sweet lady, said Florian. All men are fools, and all men are knights, where women are concerned. It was a good show, sad and sweet both, with a sprightly sword fight at the end, and a nicely painted giant. When it was all over, the fat woman went amongst the crowd to collect coins while the girl packed away the puppets. Dunk collected Dunk collected Egg and went up to her. My lord, she said with a sideways glance and a half smile. She was a head shorter than he was, but still taller than any other girl he had ever seen. That was good, Egg enthused. I like how you make the move, John Quill and a dragon and all. I saw a puppet show last year, but they moved all jerky. Yours are way more smooth. Thank you, she said to the boy politely. Dunk said, your figures are well carved too. The dragon especially. A fearsome beast. You make them yourself? She nodded. My uncle does the carving. I paint them. Could you paint something for me? I have the coin to pay. He flipped the shield off his shoulder and turned it to her. I need to paint something over the chalice. The girl glanced at the shield, then at him. What would you want painted? Dunk had not considered that. If not the old man's winged chalice, then what? His head was empty. Dunk the lunk, thick as a castle wall, he can hear the old man saying. I don't. I. I'm not certain. His ears were turning red, he realized miserably. You must think me an utter fool. She smiled. All men are fools, and all men are knights. What color paint do you have? He asked, hoping that might give him an idea. I can mix paints to make any color you want. The old man's brown had always seemed drab to Dunk. The field should be the color of sunset, he said suddenly. The old man liked sunsets. And the device? An elm tree, said Egg. A big elm tree, like the one by the pool, our camp. with a brown trunk and green branches? Yes, said Dunk. That would serve. An elm tree. But with a shooting star above, do you think you can do something like that? The girl nodded. Give me the shield. I'll paint it this very night and have it back to you on the morrow. Dunk handed it over. I am called Sir Duncan the Tall. I'm Tansel, she laughed. Tansel Too Tall, the boys used to call me. You're not too tall, Dunk blurted out almost without thinking. You're just right for. He realized what he was about to say, and he blushed furiously. For? What am I just right for? Said Tansel, cocking her head inquisitively. You're just right for puppets, he finished lamely. The first day of the tourney dawned bright and clear. Dunk brought a sack full of foodstuffs, so they were able to break their fast on goose eggs, fried bread, and bacon. But when the food was cooked, he found he had no appetite. His belly felt hard as a rock, even though he knew he would not ride today. The right of first challenge would go to knights of higher birth and greater renown, to lords and their sons, and champions from other tourneys. Egg chattered all through their breakfast, talking of this man and that man, how this man might fare, how that one might fare. He was not japing me when he said he knew every good knight in the seven kingdoms, Dunk thought ruefully. He found it humbling to listen so intently to the words of a scrawny orphan boy, but Egg's knowledge might serve him should he face one of these men in a tilt. The meadow was a churning mass of people, all trying to elbow their way closer for a better view. Dunk was as good as an elbower as any, and bigger than most. He squirmed forward to a rise 6 yards from the fence. When Egg complained that all he could see were arses, Dunk sat the boy on his shoulders. Across the field, the viewing stand was filling up with high-born ladies and lords and a few rich townsfolk, and a score of knights who had decided not to compete today. Of Prince Macar he saw no sign, but he recognized Prince Baylor at Lord Ashford's side. Sunlight flashed golden off the shoulder clasp that held his cloak and the slim coronet about his temples. But otherwise, he dressed far more simply than most of the other lords. He does not look like a Targaryen in truth with that dark hair, Dunk said as much to Egg. It said he favors his mother, the boy reminded him. She was a Dornish princess. The 5 champions had raised their pavilions at the north end of the lists, with the river behind them. The smallest 2 were orange, and the shields hung outside their doors displayed the white sun and chevron. Those would be Lord Ashford's sons, Androw and Robert, brothers to the fair maid. Dunk had never heard other knights speak of their prowess, which meant they would likely be the first to fall. Beside the orange pavilions stood one of deep-dyed green, much larger. The golden rose of Highgarden flapped above it, and the same device was emblazoned on the great green shield outside of the door. That's Leo Tyrell, Lord of Highgarden, said Egg. I knew that, said Dunk, irritated. The old man and I served at Highgarden before you were ever born. He hardly remembered that year himself, but Sir Arlen had often spoken of Leo Longthorn, as he was sometimes called, a peerless jouster, for all the silver in his hair. That must be Lord Leo beside the tent, the slender graybeard in the green and the gold. Yes, said Egg. I saw him at King's Landing once. He's not the one you'll want to challenge, sir. Boy, I do not require your counsel on whom I shall challenge. The 4th pavilion was sewn together from diamond-shaped pieces of cloth, alternating red and white. Dunk did not know the colors, but Egg said they belonged to a knight from the Vale of Arryn named Sir Humphrey Harding. He won a great melee at Maidenpool last year, sir, and overthrew Sir Donald of Duskendale and the Lords Arryn and Royce in the lists. The last pavilion was Prince Valar's. Of black silk it was, with a line of pointed scarlet pennons hanging from its roof like long red flames. The shield on its stand was glossy black, emblazoned with the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen. One of the Kingsguard knights stood beside it, his shining white armor stark against the black of the tent cloth. Seeing him there, Dunk wondered whether any of the challengers would dare to touch the dragon shield. Valar was the king's grandson after all, and son to Baelor Breakspear himself. He need not have worried. When the horns blew to summon the challengers, all 5 of the Fair Maid's champions were called forth to defend her. Dunk could hear the murmur of excitement in the crowd as the challengers appeared one by one at the south end of the list. Heralds boomed out the name of each knight in turn. They paused before the viewing stand to dip their lances in salute to Lord Ashford, Prince Baelor, and to the Fair Maid, then circled to the north end of the field to select their opponents. The Grey Lion of Casterly Rock struck the shield of Lord Tyrell, while his golden-haired heir, Sir Tybalt Lannister, challenged Lord Ashford's eldest son. Lord Tully of Riverrun tapped the diamond-patterned shield of Sir Humphrey Harding. Sir Abelard Hightower knocked upon Valar's, and the younger Ashford was called out by Sir Lionel Baratheon, the knight that they called the Laughing Storm. The challengers trotted back to the south end of the list to await their foes. Sir Abelard, in silver and smoke colors, a stone watchtower on his shield, crowned with fire, the 2 Lannisters all crimson, bearing the golden lion of Casterly Rock. The Laughing Storm, shining in cloth of gold with a black stag on his breast and shield and a rack of iron antlers on his helm. Lord Tully, wearing a striped blue and red cloak clasped with a silver trout at each shoulder. They pointed their 12-foot lances skyward, the gusty wind snapping and tugging at the pennons. At the north end of the field, squires held brightly barded destriers for the champions to mount. They donned their helms and took up lance and shield, in splendor the equal of their foes, the Ashfords billowing orange silks, Sir Humphrey's red and white diamonds, Lord Leo on his white charger with green satin trappings patterned with golden roses, and of course, Valar Targaryen. The young prince's horse was black as night, to match the color of his armor, lance, shield, and trappings. Atop his helm was a gleaming 3-headed dragon, wings spread, enameled in rich red. Its twin was painted upon the glossy black surface of his shield. Each of the defenders had a wisp of orange silk knotted about an arm, favors bestowed by the Fair Maid. As the champions trotted into position, Ashford Meadow grew almost still. Then, a horn sounded, and stillness turned to tumult in half a heartbeat. 10 pairs of gilded spurs drove into the flanks of 10 great war horses. 1,000 voices began to scream and shout. 40 iron-shod hooves pounded and tore the grass. 10 lances dipped and steadied. The field seemed almost to shake, and champions and challengers came together in a rending crash of wood and steel. In an instant, the riders were beyond each other, wheeling about for another pass. Lord Tully reeled in the saddle, but managed to keep his seat. When the commoners realized that all 10 of the lances had broken, a great roar of approval went up. It was a splendid omen for the success of the tourney and a testament to the skill of the competitors. Squires handed fresh lances to the jousters to replace the broken ones. They cast aside, and once more the spurs dug deep. Dunk could feel the earth trembling beneath the soles of his feet. Atop his shoulders, Egg shouted happily and waved his pipe-stem arms. The young prince passed nearest to them. Dunk saw the point of his black lance kiss the watchtower on his foe's shield and slide off to slam into his chest, even as Sir Abelard's own lance burst into splinters against Valar's breastplate. The gray stallion in the silver and smoke trappings reared with the force of the impact, and Sir Abelard Hightower was lifted from his stirrups and dashed violently to the ground. Lord Tully was down as well, unhorsed by Sir Humphrey Harding. But he sprang up at once and drew his longsword, and Sir Humphrey cast aside his lance. unbroken by the way, and dismounted to continue their fight afoot. Sir Abelard was not so sprightly. His squire ran out, loosened his helm, and called for help, and two serving men lifted the dazed knight by the arms to help him back to his pavilion. Elsewhere on the field, the 6 knights who had remained ahorse were riding their third course. More lances shattered, and this time Lord Leo Tyrrell aimed his point so expertly he ripped the Grey Lion's helm cleanly off his head. Barefaced, the Lord of Casterly Rock raised his hand in salute and dismounted, yielding the match. By then, Sir Humphrey had beaten Lord Tully into surrender, showing himself as skilled with a sword as he was on his horse with a lance. Tybalt Lannister and Andral Ashford rode against each other thrice more before Sir Andral finally lost shield, seat, and match all at once. The younger Ashford lasted even longer, breaking no less than 9 lances against Sir Lionel Baratheon, the Laughing Storm, who was a legendary warrior. Champion and Challenger both lost their saddles on their 10th course, only to rise together to fight on, sword against mace. Finally, a battered Sir Robert Ashford admitted defeat. But on the viewing stand, his father looked anything but dejected. Both Lord Ashford's sons had been ushered from the ranks of the champions, it was true, but they had acquitted themselves nobly against 2 of the finest knights in the realm. I must do even better, though, Dunk thought as he watched Victor and Vanquished embrace and walk together from the field. It is not enough for me to fight well and lose. I must win at least the first challenge, or I lose all. Sir Tybalt Lannister and the Laughing Storm would now take their places amongst the champions, replacing the men they had defeated. Already, the orange pavilions were coming down. A few feet away, the young prince sat at his ease in a raised camp chair before his great black tent. His helm was off. He had dark hair like his father, but a bright streak ran through it. A serving man brought him a silver goblet, and he took a sip. Water, if he is wise, Dunk thought. Wine is not. He found himself wondering if Valar had indeed inherited a measure of his father's prowess, or whether it had only been that he had drawn the weakest opponent. A fanfare of trumpets announced that 3 new challengers had entered the lists. The heralds shouted their names. Sir Pierce of House Cairn, Lord of the Marshes! He had a silver harp emblazoned on his shield, though his surcoat was patterned with nightingales. Sir Joseph of House Malasta, from Sea God! Sir Joseph sported a winged helm. On his shield, a silver eagle flew across the indigo sky. Sir Gawain of House Swan, Lord of Stonehelm, on the Cape of Wrath. A pair of swans, one black and one white, fought furiously on his arms. Lord Gawain's armor, cloak, and horse bardings were a riot of black and white, as well, down to the stripes on his scabbard and lance. Lord Cairn, harper and singer, and knight of renown, touched the point of his lance to Lord Tyrrell's rose. Sir Joseph thumped on Sir Humphrey Harding's diamonds, and the black and white knight, Lord Gawain Swan, challenged the Black Prince with the White Guardian. Dunk rubbed his chin. Lord Gawain was even older than the man, and the old man was dead. Egg, who was the least dangerous of these challengers? He asked the boy on his shoulders, who seemed to know so much of these knights. Lord Gawain, the boy said at once. Valar's foe? Prince Valar, Dunk corrected. A squire must keep a courteous tongue, boy. The 3 challengers took their places as the 3 champions mounted up. Men were making wagers all around them and calling out encouragement to their choices, but Dunk had eyes only for the prince. On the first pass, he struck Lord Gawain's shield a glancing blow, the blunted point of the lance sliding aside just as it had with Sir Abelard Hightower. Only this time, it was deflected the other way, into empty air. Lord Gawain's own lance broke clean against the prince's chest, and Valar seemed about to fall for an instant before he recovered his seat. The second time through the list, Valar swung his lance left, aiming for the foe's breast, but struck his shoulder instead. Even so, the blow was enough to make the older knight lose his lance. One arm flailed for balance, and Lord Gawain fell. The young prince swung from the saddle and drew his sword, but the fallen man waved him off and raised his visor. I yield, your grace, I yield, he called. Well fought! The lords in the viewing stand echoed him, shouting, Well fought! Well fought! Well fought, Prince Valar! As Valar knelt to help the gray-haired lord to his feet. It was not well fought, Ed complained. Be quiet, or I'll take you back to camp. Farther away, Sir Joseph Mallister was being carried off the field unconscious, while the Harp Lord and the Rose Lord were going at each other lustily with blunted long axes, to the delight of the roaring crowd. Dunk was so intent on Valar Targaryen that he scarcely saw them. He is a fair knight, but no more than that, he found himself thinking. I would have a chance against him. If the gods were good, I might even unhorse him. And once afoot, my weight and my strength would carry the day. Get him! Egg shouted merrily. Yeah, get him! Yeah, get him! Shifting his seat on Dunk's shoulders in his excitement. Get him! Hit him! He's right there! Get him! It seemed to be Lord Cairn he was cheering on. The harper was playing a different sort of music now, driving Lord Leo back and back as steel sang on steel. The crowd seemed almost equally divided between them, so cheers and curses mingled freely in the morning air. Chips of wood and paint were flying from Lord Leo's shield as Lord Pierce's axe knocked the petals off his golden rose, one by one until the shield finally shattered and split. But as it did, the axe head hung up for an instant in the wood, and Lord Leo's own axe crashed down on the haft of his foe's weapon, breaking it off not a foot from his hand. He cast aside his broken shield, and suddenly he was on the attack. Within moments, the Harper Knight was on one knee, singing a song of surrender. For the rest of the morning, and well into the afternoon, it was more of the same, as challengers took the field in twos and threes, and sometimes fives together. Trumpets blew, the heralds called out names, war horses charged, the crowd cheered, they jeered, lances snapped like twigs, and swords rang against helms and mail. It was, small folk and high lord alike, a splendid day of jousting. Sir Humphrey Harding and Sir Humphrey Beesbury, a bold young knight in the yellow and black stripes with 3 beehives on the shield, splintered no less than a dozen lances apiece in an epic struggle the small folk soon began calling the Battle of the Humphrey. Sir Tybalt Lannister was unhorsed by Sir John Penrose and broke his sword in his fall. He fought back with shield alone to win the bout and remain a champion. One-eyed Sir Robin Risling, a grizzled old knight with a salt and pepper beard, lost his helm to Lord Leo's lance in their first course, yet refused to yield. 3 times more they rode at each other, the wind whipping Sir Robin's hair while the shards of broken lances flew around his bare face like wooden knives, which Dunk thought all the more wondrous. When Egg told him that Sir Robin had lost his eye to a splinter from a broken lance not 5 years earlier. Leo Tyrell was too chivalrous to aim another lance at Sir Robin's unprotected head, but even so, Ristling's stubborn courage, or was it folly, left Dunk astounded. Finally, the Lord of Highgarden struck Sir Robin's breastplate a solid thump right over the heart and sent him cartwheeling into the earth. Sir Lionel Baratheon also fought several notable matches. Against lesser foes, he would often break into booming laughter the moment they touched his shield, and laugh the whole time he was mounting and charging and knocking them from the stirrups. If his challengers wore any sort of crest on their helm, Sir Lionel would strike it off and fling it into the crowd. The crests were ornate, beautiful things, made of carved wood or shaped leather, sometimes gilded with gold or silver and enameled. Some of them were even wrought in pure silver, so the men he beat did not appreciate this habit, though it made him a favorite to the common folk. Before long, only crestless men were choosing him. As loud and often as Sir Lionel laughed down a challenger, though, Dunk thought the day's honor should go to Sir Humphrey Harding, who humbled 14 knights, each one of them formidable. Meanwhile, the young prince sat outside his black pavilion, drinking from his silver goblet and rising from time to time to mount his horse and vanquish yet another undistinguished foe. He had won 9 victories, but it seemed to Dunk that every one was hollow. He is beating old men and up-jumped squires, and a few lords of high birth and low skill. The truly dangerous men are riding past his shield as if they don't see it. Late in the day, A brazen fanfare announced the entry of a new challenger to the list. He rode in on a great red charger, whose black bardings were slashed to reveal glimpses of yellow, crimson, and orange beneath. As he approached the viewing stand to make his salute, Dunk saw the face beneath the raised visor and recognized the prince he'd met in Lord Ashford's stables. Egg's legs tightened around his neck. "Stop that!" Dunk snapped, yanking them apart. "Do you mean to choke me?" "Prince Arian Brightflame," a herald called, "of the Red Keep of King's Landing, son of Maekar, Prince of Summerhall, of House Targaryen, grandson to Daeron the Good, the second of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar and the First Men, and Lord of the Seven Kingdoms." Arian bore a three-headed dragon on his shield, but it was rendered in colors much more vivid than Valar's. One head was orange, one yellow, one red, and the flames they breathed had the sheen of gold leaf. His surcoat was a swirl of smoke and fire woven together, and his blackened helm was surmounted by a crest of enameled flame. After a pause to dip his lance to Prince Baelor, a pause so brief that it was almost perfunctory, he galloped to the north end of the field, past Lord Leo's pavilion and the Laughing Storms, slowing only when he approached Prince Valar's tent. The young prince rose and stood stiffly beside his shield, and for a moment, Dunk was certain that Arian meant to strike it. But then he laughed and trotted past and banged his point hard against Sir Humphrey Harding's diamonds. "Ha ha ha! Come out, little knight, come out," he sang in a loud, clear voice. "It's time you faced the dragon." Sir Humphrey inclined his head stiffly to his foe as his destrier was brought out, and then ignored him while he mounted, fastened his helm, and took up lance and shield. The spectators grew quiet as the two knights took their places. Dunk heard the clang of Prince Arian dropping his visor. The horn blew. Sir Humphrey broke slowly, building speed, but his foe raked the red charger with both spurs, coming hard. Egg's legs tightened again. "Kill him!" he shouted suddenly. "Kill him! Kill him! He's right there, Sir Humphrey! Kill him!" Dunk was not certain which of the knights he was shouting to until he heard Sir Humphrey's name. Prince Arian's lance, gold-tipped and painted in stripes of red, orange, and yellow, swung down across the barrier. Low. Much too low, thought Dunk the moment he saw it. He'll miss the rider and strike Sir Humphrey's horse. He needs to bring that lance up. Then, with a dawning horror, he began to suspect that Arian intended no such thing. He cannot mean to. At the last possible instant, Sir Humphrey's stallion reared away from the oncoming point, eyes rolling in terror, but much, much too late. Arian's lance took the animal just above the armor that protected his breastplate, breastbone, and exploded out of the back of his neck in a gout of bright blood. Screaming, the horse crashed sideways, knocking the wooden barrier to pieces as he fell. Sir Humphrey tried to leap free, but a foot was caught in his stirrups, and they heard his shriek as his leg was crushed between the splintered fence and the falling horse. Ah! All of Ashford Meadow was shouting. Men ran onto the field to extricate Sir Humphrey, but the stallion, dying in agony, kicked at them as they approached. Arian, having raced blithely around the carnage to the end of the list, wheeled his horse and came galloping back. He was shouting too, though Dunk could not make out the words over the almost human screams of the dying horse. Vaulting from the saddle, Arian drew his sword and advanced on his fallen foe. His own squires and one of Sir Humphrey's had to pull him back. Egg squirmed on Dunk's shoulders. "Let me down!" the boy yelled. "The poor horse, let me down now, sir!" Dunk felt sick himself. What would I do if such a fate befell Thunder? A man-at-arms with a poleaxe dispatched Sir Humphrey's stallion, ending the hideous screams. Dunk turned and forced his way through the press. When he came to open ground, he lifted Egg off his shoulders. The boy's hood had fallen back, and his eyes were red. A terrible sight, aye, he told the lad. But a squire must needs be strong. You'll see worse mishaps at other tourneys, I fear. It was no mishap, Egg yelled, mouth trembling. Arian meant to do it, you saw it. Dunk frowned. It had looked that way to him as well, but it was hard to accept that any knight could be so unchivalrous, least of all, one who was blood of the dragon. I saw a knight, green as summer grass, lose control of his lance, he said stubbornly, and I'll hear no more of it. The jousting is done for the day, I think. Come, lad. Dunk was right about the end of the day's contest. By the time the chaos had been set to rights, the sun was low in the west, and Lord Ashford had called a halt. As the shadows of evening crept across the meadow, 100 torches were lit along the merchant's row. Dunk brought a horn of ale for himself and a half of a horn for the boy to cheer him up. They wandered for a time, listening to a sprightly air on pipes and drums and watching a puppet show about Nymeria, the warrior queen with the 10,000 ships. The puppeteers had only 2 ships, but managed a rousing sea battle all the same. Dunk wanted to ask the girl Tansel if she had finished painting his shield, but he could see that she was busy. I'll wait until she is done for the night, he resolved. Perhaps she'll have a thirst then. Sir Duncan, a voice called behind him. And then again, Sir Duncan! Suddenly, Dunk remembered that was his name. I saw you amongst the small folk today, with a boy on your shoulders, said Raymond Fossaway as he came up smiling. Indeed, the two of you were extremely hard to miss. The boy is my squire. Egg, this is Raymond Fossaway. Dunk had to pull the boy forward, and even then, Egg lowered his head and stared at Raymond's boots as he mumbled a greeting. Well met, lad, Raymond said easily. Sir Duncan, why not watch from the viewing gallery? All knights are welcome there. Dunk was at ease amongst the small folk and the servants. The idea of claiming a place amongst the lords, ladies, and landed knights made him uncomfortable. I would not have wanted any closer view of that last tilt. Raymond grimaced. Nor I. Lord Ashford declared Sir Humphrey the victor and awarded him Prince Arian's courser. But even so, he would not be able to continue. His leg was broken in 2 places. Prince Baelor sent his own maester to tend to him. Will there be another champion in Sir Humphrey's place? Lord Ashford had a mind to grant the place to Lord Caron, or perhaps the other Sir Humphrey, the one who gave Harding such a splendid match. But Prince Baelor told him that it would not be seemly to remove Sir Humphrey's shield and pavilion under the circumstances. I believe they will continue with 4 champions in place of 5. 4 champions? Dunk thought. Leo Tyrell, Lionel Baratheon, Tybalt Lannister, and Prince Valar. He had seen enough this first day to know how little chance he would stand against the first 3, which left only... A Hedge knight cannot challenge a prince, Dunk thought to himself. Valar is second in line to the Iron Throne. He is Baelor Breakspear's son, and his blood is the blood of the dragon, the blood of Aegon the Conqueror and the young dragon, and Prince Aemon, the Dragon Knight. And I am some boy the old man found behind a pot shop at Flea Bottom. I'm nothing compared to these men. His head hurt just thinking about it. Who does your cousin mean to challenge? He asked Raymond. Sir Tybalt, all things being equal. They are well matched. My cousin keeps a sharp watch on every tilt, though. Should any man be wounded on the morrow, or show signs of exhaustion or weakness, Stefan will be quick to knock on his shield. You may count on that. No one has ever accused him of an excess of chivalry. He laughed as if to take the sting from his words. Sir Duncan, join me for a cup of wine? I have a matter to attend to, said Dunk, uncomfortable with the notion of accepting hospitality that he himself could not return. I could wait here and bring your shield when the puppet show is over, sir, said Egg. They're going to do Simeon Star Eyes later and make the dragon fight again as well. There, you see? Your matter is attended to, and the wine awaits, said Raymond. It's an arbor vintage, too. How can you refuse me? Bereft of excuses, Dunk had no choice but to follow, leaving Egg at the puppet show. The apple of House Fossaway flew above the gold-colored pavilion where Raymond attended his cousin. Behind it, two servants were basting a goat with honey and herbs over a small cook fire. There's food as well if you're hungry, Raymond said negligently as he held the flap for Dunk. A brazier of coals lit the interior and made the air pleasantly warm. Raymond filled 2 cups with wine. They say Arian is in a rage at Lord Ashford for awarding his charger to Sir Humphrey, he commented as he poured. But I'll wager it was his uncle who counseled it. He handed Dunk a wine cup. Prince Baelor is an honorable man. And the bright prince is not? Raymond said in between drinking. Don't look so anxious, Sir Duncan. There's no one here but us. It is no secret that Arian is a bad piece of work. Thank the gods that he is well down in the order of succession. You truly believe he meant to kill the horse? Is there any doubt of it? If Prince Makar had been there, it would have gone differently, I promise you, Raymond said, swishing his wine. Arian is all smiles and chivalry, so long as his father is watching, if the tales be true. But when he's not watching... I saw that Prince Makar's chair was empty. He's left Ashford to search for his sons, along with Roland Crakehall of the Kingsguard. There's a wild tale of robber knights going about. But I'll wager the prince is just off drunk somewhere again. The wine was fine and fruity. As good a cup as he had ever tasted. He rolled it in his mouth, swallowed, and said, Which prince is this one now? Makar there, Daron. He's named after the king. They call him Daron the Drunk, though, not in his father's hearing. The youngest boy was with him as well. They left Summerhall together, but never reached Ashford. Raymond drained his cup, set it aside, and ended with, Poor Makar. Poor? Said Dunk, startled. The king's son? The king's 4th son, corrected Raymond. Not quite as bold as Prince Baelor, nor as clever as Prince Ares, nor as gentle as Prince Rhaegal. And now he must suffer seeing his own sons overshadowed by his brothers. Daron is a sot. Arian is vain and cruel. The 3rd son was so unpromising they gave him to the Citadel to make a maester of him. And the youngest... Sir! Sir Duncan! Sir Duncan! Egg burst in, panting. His hood was falling back, and the light from the brazier shone in his big dark eyes. You have to run! He's hurting her! Dunk lurched to his feet, confused. Hurting? Who? Arian! The boy shouted. He's hurting her! The puppet girl, hurry! He's hurting Tencel! Whirling, he darted back out into the night. Dunk made to follow, but Raymond grabbed him by the arm. Sir Duncan. Arian, he said. A prince of the blood, be careful. It was good counsel, he knew. The old man would have said the same, but he could not listen. He wrenched free of Raymond's grip and shouldered his way out of his pavilion. He could hear shouting off in the direction of the Merchant's Row. Egg was almost out of sight. Dunk ran after him. His legs were long and the boy short, so he quickly closed the distance. A wall of watchers had gathered around the puppeteers. Dunk shouldered through them, ignoring their curses. A man-at-arms in the royal livery stepped up to block him. Dunk put a big hand on his chest and shoved, sending the man flailing backward to sprawl on his arse in the dirt. The puppeteer stall had been knocked on its side. The fat Dornish woman was on the ground weeping. Please, mercy. One man-at-arms was dangling the puppets of Florian and Jonquil from his hands as another set them afire with a torch. 3 more men were opening chests, spilling more puppets on the ground and stamping on them. The dragon puppet was scattered all about them, a broken wing here, its head there, tail in 3 pieces, and in the midst of it all stood Prince Arion, resplendent in a red velvet doublet with long, dagged sleeves, twisting Tensel's arms in both hands. She was on her knees, pleading and crying. Arion ignored her. He forced open her hand and seized one of her fingers. Dunk stood there stupidly, not quite believing what he saw and not knowing what quite to do. Then he heard a crack, and Tensel screamed. Ah! One of Arion's men tried to grab him and went flying. 3 long strides, and Dunk grabbed the prince's shoulder and wrenched him around hard. You son of a whore! His sword and dagger were forgotten, along with everything the old man had ever taught him. His fist knocked Arion off his feet, and the toe of his boot slammed into the prince's belly. Ah! Ah! The prince grunted in pain. When Arion went for the knife, Dunk stepped on his wrist and kicked him again, right in his mouth. He might have kicked him to death right then and there, but the princeling's men swarmed over him. He had a man on each arm and another pounding him across the back. Ugh! No sooner had he wrestled free of one than 2 more were on him. Finally, they shoved him down and they pinned his arms and legs. Arion was on his feet again. The prince's mouth was bloody. He pushed inside of it with a finger. You've loosened one of my teeth, Arion complained. So we'll start by breaking all of yours. He pushed his hair from his eyes. You look familiar. You took me for a stable boy, Dunk said. Arion smiled redly. I recall. You refused to take my horse. Why did you throw your life away? For this Dornish whore? Tensel was curled up on the ground, cradling her maimed hand. He gave her a shove with the toe of his boot. She's scarcely worth it. The whore is a traitor. The dragon ought never lose, even in a puppet show. He is mad, thought Dunk, but he is still a prince's son, and he means to kill me. He might have prayed then if he had known a prayer all the way through, but there was no time. There was hardly even time to be afraid. Nothing more to say? You bore me, sir. He poked at his bloody mouth again. Get a hammer and break all his teeth out, he commanded. And then let's cut him open and show him the color of his entrails. No! A boy's voice yelled. Don't hurt him! Gods be good, the foolish boy. What a brave and foolish boy, Dunk thought. He fought against the arms restraining him, but it was no good. Hold your tongue, you stupid lad. Run away, don't worry about me, they'll hurt you. Do not worry about me. No, they won't, Egg yelled as he moved closer. If they do, they'll answer to my father and to my uncle as well. Let go of him, I said. Wait, Yorkle, you know me, you serve me just as well as you serve Arion. Do as I say immediately. Unhand this man. The hands holding his left arm were gone. Then the ones holding his right. Then all the others restraining him. Dunk did not understand what in the 7 hells was happening. The men at arms were backing away. One even knelt. Then the crowd parted for Raymond Fossaway. He had donned mail and helm, and his hand was on his sword. His cousin, Sir Stefan, just behind him, had already bared his blade, and with them were a half a dozen men at arms with the red apple badge sewn on their breasts. Prince Arion paid them no mind. Impudent little wretch, he said to Egg, spitting a mouthful of blood at the boy's feet. What happened to your hair? I cut it off, brother, said Egg. I didn't want to spend my life looking like you. The second day of the tourney was overcast, with a gusty wind blowing in from the west. The crowds should be less on a day like this, Dunk thought. It would have been easier for them to find a spot near the fence to see the jousting up close. Egg might have sat on a rail while I stood behind him. Instead, Egg would have a seat in the viewing box, dressed in silks and furs, while Dunk's view would be limited to the four walls of the tower cell where Lord Ashford's men had confined him. The chamber had a window, but it faced in the wrong direction. Even so, Dunk crammed himself into the window seat as the sun came up, and stared gloomily off across town and field and forest. They had taken his hempen sword belt and his sword and dagger with it, and they had taken his silver as well. He hoped Egg or Raymond would remember Chestnut and Thunder. Egg, he muttered low under his breath. His squire, a poor lad plucked from the streets of King's Landing, had ever a knight been made such a fool? Dunk the lunk, thick as a castle wall and slow as an oryx, he can hear Sir Arlen jest. He had not been permitted to speak to Egg since Lord Ashford's soldiers had scooped them all up at the puppet show. Nor Raymond, nor Tansel, nor anyone, not even Lord Ashford himself. He wondered if he would ever see any of them again. For all he knew, they meant to keep him in the small room until he died. What did I think would happen? He asked himself bitterly. I knocked down a prince's son, and I kicked him in the face. Beneath these gray skies, the flowing finery of the high-born lords and great champions would not seem quite so splendid as they had the day before. The sun, walled behind the clouds, would not brush their steel helms with brilliance nor make their gold and silver chasings glitter and flash. But even so, Dunk wished that he was in the crowd to watch the jousting. It would be a good day for hedge knights, for men in plain mail on unbarded horses. He could hear them, at least. The horns of the heralds carried well, and from time to time a roar from the crowd told him that someone had fallen or risen, or done something especially bold. He heard faint hoofbeats too, and once in a great while the clash of swords, or the snap of a lance. Dunk winced whenever he heard that last. It reminded him of the noise Tansel's finger had made when Arion broke it. There were other sounds too, closer at hand. Footfalls in the hall outside of his door, the stamp of hooves in the yard below, shouts and voices from the castle walls. Sometimes they drowned out the tourney. Dunk supposed that was just as well. A hedge knight is the truest kind of knight, Dunk, the old man had told him a long, long time ago. Other knights serve the lords who keep them, or from whom they hold their lands. But we serve where we will, for men whose causes we believe in. Every knight swears to protect the weak and the innocent, but we keep the vow best, I think. Queer how strong that memory seemed. Dunk had forgotten those words, and perhaps the old man had as well, toward the end. The morning had turned to afternoon. The distant sounds of the tourney began to dwindle and die. Dusk began to seep into the cell, but Dunk still sat in the window seat, looking out on the gathering dark and trying to ignore his empty belly. And then he heard footsteps and a jangling of iron keys. He uncoiled and rose to his feet as the door opened. 2 guards pushed in, one bearing an oil lamp. A serving man followed with a tray of food. Behind came Egg. Leave the lamp and the food and go, the boy told them. They did as he commanded, though Dunk noticed that they left the heavy wooden door ajar. The smell of the food made him realize how ravenous he was. There was hot bread and honey, a bowl of peas porridge, a skewer of roast onions, and well-charred meat. He sat by the tray, pulled apart the bread with his hands, and stuffed some into his mouth. There's no knife, he observed. Did they think I'd stab you, boy? They didn't tell me what they thought. Egg wore a close-fitting black wool doublet with a tucked waist and long sleeves lined with red satin. Across his chest was sewn the 3-headed dragon of House Targaryen. My uncle says I must humbly beg you for forgiveness for deceiving you. Your uncle, said Dunk. That would be Prince Baelor. The boy looked miserable. I My apologies, sir. I never meant to lie to you. But you did. About everything. Starting with your name. I never heard of a Prince Egg. It's short for Egan. My brother Emin named me Egg. He's off at the Citadel now, learning to be a maester. And Dayron sometimes calls me Egg as well. And so do my sisters. Dunk lifted the skewer and bit into the chunk of meat. Goat, flavored with some lordly spice he'd never even tasted before. Grease ran down his chin. Egan, he repeated. Of course it would be Egan. Like Egan the dragon. How many Egans have been king anyway? 4, the boy said. There's been 4 Egans. Dunk chewed, swallowed, and tore off some more bread. Why did you do it? Was it some jape to make a fool of the stupid Hedge Knight? No. The boy's eyes filled with tears, but he stood there manfully. I was supposed to squire for Dayron. He's my oldest brother. I learned everything I had to learn to be a good squire, but Dayron isn't even a good knight. He's a coward. He didn't want to ride an attorney, so after we left Summerhall, he stole away from our escort, only instead of doubling back, he went straight on toward Ashford, thinking they'd never look for us that way. It was pretty clever of him, I must admit. It was him who shaved my head. He knew my father would send men hunting us down. Dayron has common hair, sort of a pale brown. His hair is nothing special. But mine? My hair is like the hair of my father. My hair is like Arian's. My hair is the hair of old Valyria. The blood of the dragon, Dunk said. Silver gold hair and purple eyes. Everyone knows this. Thick as a castle wall, Dunk, he heard Sir Arlen jest. Yes. So Dayron shaved it off. He meant for us to hide until the tourney was over. Only then, you took me for a stable boy and... He lowered his eyes then. I didn't care if Dayron fought or not, but I wanted to be someone, squire. I'm sorry, sir, I truly am, but I want to be a squire. Dunk looked at him thoughtfully. He knew what it was like to want something so bad that you would tell a monstrous lie just to get to it. I thought you were like me, he said. Might be you are, only not the way I thought. We're both from King's Landing, the boy said hopefully. Dunk had to laugh. Yes, you're from the top of Egan's High Hill, and me, I'm from Flea Bottom. That's not so far, sir. Dunk took a bite from an onion. Do I need to call you my lord or your grace or something like that? At court, sure, the boy admitted. But other times, you can keep on calling me Egg, if it pleases you, sir. What will they do with me, Egg? My uncle wants to see you after you're done eating, sir. Dunk shoved the platter aside and stood up. I'm done now, then. I've already kicked one prince in the mouth. I don't mean to keep another one waiting on me. Lord Ashford had turned his own chambers over to Prince Baelor for the duration of his stay. So it was to the Lord Solar that Egan, he would have to get used to that, conducted him. Baelor sat reading by the light of a beeswax candle. Dunk knelt before him. Rise, the prince said. Would you care for wine? As it please you, your grace. Egan, pour Sir Duncan a cup of that sweet Dornish red, the prince commanded. Try not to spill it on him. You've done him sufficient ill already. The boy won't spill it, your grace, said Dunk. He's a good lad, a good squire, and he meant no harm to me, I know. One need not intend harm to do it. Egan should have come to me when he saw what his brother was doing to these puppeteers. Instead, he ran to you. That was no kindness. What you did, sir? Well, I might have done the same in your place, but I am a prince of the realm. I'm not some up-jumped hedge knight. It is never wise to strike a king's grandson in anger, no matter the cause. Dunk nodded grimly. Egg offered him a silver goblet, brimming with wine. He accepted it and took a long swallow. I hate Arian, Egg said with vehemence. And I had to run for Sir Duncan, uncle. The castle was too far. Arian is your brother, the prince said firmly, and the Septons say we must love our brothers. Egan, leave us now. I would speak with Sir Duncan privately. The boy put down the flagon of wine and bowed stiffly. As you will, your grace. He went to the door of the solar and closed it softly behind him. Baylor Breakspear studied Dunk's eyes for a long moment. Sir Duncan, let me ask you this. How good a knight are you, truly? How skilled at arms? Dunk did not know what to say. Sir Arlen taught me sword and shield, and how to tilt at rings and contains. Prince Baylor seemed troubled by that answer. My brother Makar returned to the castle a few hours ago. He found his heir drunk in an inn a day's ride to the south. Makar would never admit as such, but I believe it was a secret hope that his sons might outshine mine in this tourney. Instead, they have both shamed him. But what is he to do? They are blood of his blood. Makar is angry and must needs have a target for his wrath. Unfortunately, he has chosen you. Me? Dunk said miserably. Arian has already filled his father's ear, and Dayron has not helped you either. To excuse his own cowardice, he told my brother that a huge robber knight chance met on the road made off with Egan. I fear you have been cast as this robber knight, sir. In Dayron's tale, he has spent all these days pursuing you hither and yon to win back his brother. But Egan will tell him the truth. Egg will tell him. I have no doubt about that, said Prince Baylor calmly. But the boy has been known to lie too, as you have good reason to recall. Which son will my brother believe? As for the matter of these puppeteers, by the time Arian is done twisting the tail, it'll be high treason what they did. The dragon is the sigil of the royal house. To portray one being slain, sawdust spilling from its neck, I mean, it was doubtless innocent, but it was far from wise. Those puppeteers could have chosen a better show. Arian calls it a veiled attack on House Targaryen, an incitement, an attempt to revolt. Makar would likely agree. My brother has a prickly nature, and he had placed all his best hopes on Arian since Dayron has been such a grave disappointment to him. The prince took a sip of wine, set the goblet aside. Whatever my brother believes or fails to believe, one truth is beyond dispute. You laid hands upon the blood of the dragon. For that offense, you must be tried, you must be judged, you must be punished. Punished? Dunk did not like the sound of that. Arian would like your head, with or without teeth. He will not have it, I promise you. But I cannot deny him a trial. As my royal father is hundreds of leagues away, my brother and I must sit in judgment of you, along with Lord Ashford, whose domains these are, and Lord Tyrell of Highgarden, his liege lord. The last time a man was found guilty of striking one of the royal blood, well, it was decreed that he should lose the offending hand. My hand? Dunk said aghast. And your foot. You kicked him too, if I'm not mistaken, did you not? Dunk could not speak. To be sure, I will urge my fellow judges to be merciful. I am the king's hand, and the heir to the throne. My word carries some weight. But so does my brother's. The risk is there. Said Dunk, your grace, they meant no treason. It was only a wooden dragon. It was never meant to be a royal prince, he wanted to say, but his words had deserted him once and all and were stuck in his throat. He had never been any good with words anyway. You have another choice, though, Prince Balar said quietly. You do have another choice. Whether it is a better choice or a worse one, I cannot say. But I remind you that any knight accused of a crime has the right to demand a trial by combat. So I ask you once again, Sir Duncan the Tall, how good a knight are you? Truly,